Good evening. Yeah. A very, very, very warm welcome to all of you here in person and online for joining us at this event this evening. You are very, very welcome. My name is Professor Elizabeth McCrum, and I work here at the University of Reading, where I am one of our Pro-Vice Chancellors. And it's my job just to say a few introductory words and a few words of welcome. So, I'm a Pro-Vice Chancellor, and like you, that's probably not the only hat I wear. I wear quite a lot of hats. I have a hat leading the university, leading education and student experience here, but I'm also a teacher educator, a friend, a colleague, a mother. And with all of those different hats on, I have a vested interest, a deep personal interest in young people, autistic young people thriving in life and in education, which is why I'm so very pleased I have had the opportunity to come here and welcome you this evening. The first thing that I want to do is to acknowledge the diversity of the audience that we have here this evening that you represent. And I recognise so many of you from the different roles that I have, wearing all those different hats as well, which is wonderful. But it's so great to see young people, autistic young people, their families, their friends, professionals, researchers, colleagues here this evening. It's really, really great to have such diversity of experience in what we hope will be a really inclusive event. So come on in. For those of you that have joined us here in person this evening, just to remind you of some of the aspects of that inclusion. So the quiet room in GO2, the live feed room in GO6, and of course that we all respect the communication preferences that people have indicated with their stickers this evening. So that would be great. So a key thing for us as a university is our partnership, and particularly our partnership with our local community. Now, I don't know if you know, but this event is part of our Centenary celebrations. It's 100 years since the University of Reading got its Royal Charter. But actually, our history here at the university dates back prior to that 100 years, and this date I had to write down, 1892, we started here in Reading teaching the local community, in service of the local community. So even before our Royal Charter. And for those of you that have been here before, you may well have seen aspects of us that are open to the community, as well as our teaching. You might have been to our beautiful spaces, our Harris Garden, our facilities, the sports park, all around the university. So you may know us for that. But there's an aspect of what that we do that we get to show off and showcase to you tonight that's around another aspect of what we do, and that is in terms of our research. And it's research that is applied and collaborative and really impactful. It is research that you will see which is real world and grounded in real world lived experiences and done collaboratively and shaped with, in this instance, autistic people and their families. So I hope you'll be able to see some of that this evening. I actually am quite blown away just by the number of you that are in here. Some of our lectures with our students don't get quite this full this evening, both in the lecture theatre and online, which is really something. And I think it speaks to why the topic of this evening is really so important and of such great interest to a range of different stakeholders, and I hope it will be indicative of and the start of ongoing conversations around inclusive education that caters for diverse needs. So it's really great to see all of you. And of course, about well-being, and well-being really absolutely the foundations, the ground on which learning is built. So important. If we want people to thrive, to learn, to have the outcomes we want, then well-being is absolutely the foundations of that. But of course, there are a lot of you here, and none of you actually came here to hear me. So I am going to stop in a moment. But one thing I will do is say it is part of our centenary celebrations. So I am going to extend to you another warm invitation to come back. We do have our community festival on the 16th of May. There's always lots of food and music and wonderful things going on the campus. So if you can come back to us, please do. Also, look out for our rag parade through Reading on the 17th of May as well. So it would be wonderful to see some of you again then. But without further ado, I'm actually going to hand over to my colleagues who are going to be the ones that you came to see this evening, and that is Dr. Fiona Knott, Dr. Jo Billington, and Dr. Emma Harris. And I think, Fiona, you're up first. Thank you.
Thank you, Claire. Can I extend a very warm welcome to everybody who's come here tonight, both in person here in the university and online. I'm Dr. Fiona Knott. I'm the Clinical Director of the Wellbeing Hub, and I'm here with my colleagues, Jo Billington, Emma Harris, and Claire Pears. We also have a team of student volunteers who are the ones wearing the hoodies saying, "Can I help you?" So if at any time you need directions, you need information, please do approach one of our student team. So I'm just going to briefly overview the plan for the evening. I'm going to start in a minute by just quickly telling you about the Wellbeing Hub and our journey to date. And then I'm going to hand over to Jo, who is going to talk to us about the evidence about autistic children's school experiences, and that's setting the scene for Andy Smith, who we're delighted to welcome here today from Spectrum Gaming. Andy has spearheaded a really important project looking at barriers to education for autistic children, and his talk is going to tell us about that. There will be opportunities during the next hour and a half for you to contribute. We want to find out from you what you think the Wellbeing Hub could do next, and there'll be a chance to ask questions of Andy. Because of the large size, all of those are going to be online, the way that you'll all be able to ask questions, but we'll tell you more about that as we get to that point. The talks will end at about 8:30, and then for those of you who are here in person, we'd love you to come and join us next door in the foyer, where we have refreshments, a chance to network, and we have some autism research posters showcasing the kind of research that's happening in the university about autism. So just to give you a little bit of background about the Wellbeing Hub, we are now about 3 years old. We were launched due to a very generous donation from the University of Reading alumni, who gave us a gift with the widest remit I think I've ever heard, which was to do something useful to support the mental health of autistic children and young people. So this quite extraordinary gift, of course, made us have to think quite hard about what we were going to do. We're a very small team. So the first thing we did was think about health and mental ill health. And we realised that we know an awful lot about autistic distress, but we know very little about autistic wellbeing and thriving. And we know almost nothing from the point of view of autistic young people and adults themselves. So we thought that should be our focus. We should look at autistic thriving. And the first thing we then did was to explore this in more detail. We ran a scoping study with some autistic young people and some parents. And it was very clear there were 3 pillars that were very clear that the young people told us were the things that were most important to them to support their thriving. The first was understanding themselves. The second was having people around them who understand them and who accept them for who they are. And the third was being part of a wider autistic community. If you want to know a bit more about our scoping study, we talked about it in our launch, which was about 18 months to 2 years ago, and there's a link to our YouTube page here. You'll be able to find it also through our website, so you can hear more about our scoping study and our launch if you're interested. I also want to say that we are at the moment currently entirely funded by donation. Obviously, the huge donation from the alumni started us off, but we're always immensely grateful that people donate to support the work that we're doing here in the Wellbeing Hub. So based on the things that the young people told us were most important, we have a number of themes that we're developing, have been developing over the last couple of years. So Emma Harris is leading on our NeuroBears project. This is a program developed by autistic people for young autistic children and adolescents to learn about their autism in a neurodiversity affirming way, and to learn to advocate for themselves. And we're delighted that our placement students are facilitating this program online with our parents and autistic young children. Our second theme, supporting parents and carers, this is led by Jo Billington. She has developed a new offer, family wellbeing courses, which are based on the evidence about autonomy development and how to support people to thrive, but absolutely rooted in the expertise of autistic people, both from lived experience and autistic-led research. And the third theme is the one I'm responsible for. We have a number of things we're doing in this theme, so I'm particularly interested in supporting anxious autistic young people, and I've developed workshops which are run jointly for parents and school staff, both in special schools and mainstream schools, to help people understand and support their autistic young person, anxious autistic young person. We're also really passionate about training practitioners of the future. So we have a cohort of placement students who we're training in neuroaffirming practice, and we hope will go on later to train as clinical psychologists. And we also run termly special interest group for professionals, which are in person, face to face. So we have a speaker and a chance to network over a cup of coffee. And our fourth theme is our community building pillar, where we run monthly webinars featuring autistic people who talk to us about areas that are important to them to support their thriving. When the individuals allow us, we record them, and this link takes you to our YouTube channel where you can see all the recordings of our previous events. So that's a really quick overview of what we're doing in the Hub. If you want to find out more, you can keep in touch through looking on our website, but do please sign up to our newsletter. We create one about once a month. It includes what we're doing in the Hub, but also opportunities to find out about research projects that our colleagues are doing across the school and the university as well. So do please sign up and come to our events and things that we do in the future. And I'm now pleased to hand over to Jo.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone joining us online and here in the room. It's a real pleasure to see you all. My name is Dr. Jo Billington, and I'd like to tell you a little bit about a project that means a great deal to us in the Wellbeing Hub. And it really links back to what Fiona was saying about us being absolutely guided by autistic lived experience, autistic culture, and autistic expertise, particularly the expertise of autistic children and young people. In the scoping study that Fiona mentioned that kind of kicked off the project, in addition to the 3 pillars that we constructed from the findings of that study, something that the young people would say to us frequently that got in the way of thriving when they were growing up was constantly feeling misunderstood, constantly feeling that they had to explain themselves. And so this project, the Being Me project, kind of really grew from that. And these 7 amazing autistic young people joined us to answer the question of what would you like the rest of the world to know about what it's like to be you? And we worked with them on a one-to-one basis, and they wrote and designed the interview they wanted to have. So they wrote the questions, they rehearsed their answers to those questions, and we worked with them to the point where they were happy with their responses. And then we invited a professional film crew in to record those interviews. And from that, we have created the most incredible library of expertise from these 7 young people that form the basis of the training that we provide to our placement students at the beginning of each year to develop their orientation, if you like, in neuroaffirming clinical practice. And they also form the basis of the wellbeing course, the family wellbeing course. And we use their expertise, the clips that they provide for us, to trigger conversation and discussion and conversation. And I just want to give you a flavour of the Being Me project now by showing you a short clip. But what I want to do now is just shift focus a little bit away from the Wellbeing Hub and the things that we have done so far to really kind of get specific about the theme that we're all here for tonight. And that is to think about autistic children's school experiences. Now, I know individually a number of autistic children who are really thriving at school. I know that they have a high sense of belonging. I know that they are supported by compassionate, sensitive, and inclusive staff in their school settings. But when we pan out and we look at the broader evidence base, we can see very clearly that that is not a typical situation. When we look at the research more broadly, particularly the research that consults directly with autistic children and young people about their everyday experiences of school, what we see overwhelmingly is that autistic children find school complex, demanding, and stressful. For the most part, the key challenges are sensory distress. The average primary school has 700 pupils. This is in England, at least, 700 pupils. The average secondary school has double that, and that's just pupils. That's not other people. So they're busy, they're loud, they're crowded, they're noisy, they're often smelly, often unpredictable. There's usually a very distinct lack of quiet spaces. And many autistic children feel an intense pressure to mask, to hide their autistic, authentic ways of being. And this can lead to huge amounts of fatigue, if not complete exhaustion and burnout. We know that too many autistic children experience bullying and social isolation, and many, just like in our scoping study and in the young people who contributed to the Being Me project, a sense of feeling very misunderstood and feeling unsupported as a result of that. And that feeds into a pervasive sense of not belonging and high levels of stress and anxiety. And when we look at kind of general trends, when we take the shift from research conducted with individual children and think more about the data that we get in terms of kind of educate government data and health service data, we can see really clearly some very worrying trends. Autistic children are much more likely than non-autistic children to experience academic underachievement. So that's achievement that doesn't match their abilities and their potential. We see high levels of poor mental health. And increasingly, we see more and more autistic children who find school so distressing that they're unable to attend regularly, if at all. And again, when we're looking broadly, I know there are individual schools and there are individual people who are doing really brilliant work. But when we are looking more broadly at what are the typical responses when an autistic child is finding school so distressing that it's difficult to attend, is that we see high levels of parent-carer blame. We see a kind of strict focus on attendance, so the child being in school at all costs, without really thinking about the underlying factors that might be contributing to non-attendance. And we also see wide use of punitive measures, things like attendance contracts being administered to children, fines being levied against families, and legal proceedings being started against families by local authorities. And essentially, these approaches are really predicated on this idea that the problem, in inverted commas, resides within the child and potentially their family as well. But actually what we're seeing is more and more research that's focusing and honing in on the systemic difficulties. And I know we've got many educators in the room tonight and those watching online who might see some of these systemic challenges in their everyday work, because these challenges don't just affect autistic children, they affect whole school communities. So we know that we are seeing an increasingly standardized and performance-driven education system. And we're seeing expectations of learning, behavior, and what counts as success, which are very narrow in their definition and are often based on norms that are much more appropriate to neurotypical norms than they are to neurodivergent norms. And again, I know that even in our local area, local authorities in our local area are trying to make a difference in this regard, but support nationally is very often kind of added on rather than built in from the beginning, from the ground up. And that means that children often have to reach crisis point before support can be put in place, by which time for many children, it's too late for that support to be effective, or as effective as it might have been had it been in place earlier. So tonight is really about thinking about what do we do that's different? How do we move forward? And what I would like you to do now is think about what one change would you suggest that might help most autistic children and young people to thrive at school? And I'm going to ask you to take part in an interactive exercise now. And just so that you know, all of the responses are anonymous. No identifying data will be collected. And what we'll do as part of our team is we'll collate your responses and we'll summarize them in an article that we're going to share on our website and via our newsletter as well. So if you'd like to take part in this, the information that you provide will be put into something useful for you to read afterwards. Okay, let's have a look. Okay, so using your devices if you have one. And this is also open to those of you who are watching online as well. So please, if you're joining us online, please do feel free to join in. Lots of people saying understanding, sensory friendly environments. I love the one about occupational therapists in every school. That'd be great. Fantastic. Thank you. Please do continue to add your thoughts here as we continue with the evening. There will be another question that we'll close with at the end, but do continue to add your thoughts on here. I'm already seeing lots of themes, so my geeky data side is starting to get quite excited about organising all of this later on next week. Okay, I'm going to let you carry on with that. But for now, what I'd like to do is I would like to hand over to Andy Smith from Spectrum Gaming. Andy is going to talk to you about a project, Barriers to Education, which is really incredible in the sense of doing something practical for thinking about how we do things differently. So please join me in welcoming Andy Smith.
Cheers, thank you. This is where... No, it's not doing it. Refresh it. Sorry, 1 second. I'm a person who's not supposed to get tech issues, but there you go. Yeah, okay. Yeah, can people see me online here? Yeah, okay. Yeah, hello. I don't know what to say. Hello, nice to see everyone. Thank you for coming. It's nice to see so many people. This is a really random picture. Just for context, I don't normally walk around in a maid dress. We did like a gaming marathon in our community, and our young people decided if I hit a fundraising target, that's what I had to wear for a day. So I wore it for a meetup. So there you go. So I'm Andy from Spectrum Gaming. We're a community for autistic young people, ages 10 to 17. And today I'm talking about barriers to education through the lens of autistic thriving. Yeah, so a few things to quickly mention. I actually think like this might be a bit of a hot take, but I think like the triad of impairments when you talk about autism is actually like a lot of rubbish. And I often think about how you could spin it round. Like you're told that if you're autistic, you're inflexible, but then if you're in school and you ask for an adjustment, sometimes you're told you can't. So it makes you think like, is it really you who's the inflexible one? But anyway, so my triad of impairments, I just thought I'd put as a joke to explain a few things. So one is, as well as I'm being autistic, I also have Tourette's. So if I wink at you or do any other weird movements, I'm not trying to flirt or like imply anything. Sorry if you've heard this before, but there was once a time I was at the gym and like a really, really buff, like giant man was like mid squat and he gave me eye contact and I winked and I didn't go back to the gym since because it was horrific. The second thing is I'm type 1 diabetic, so I might randomly have to eat sweets. I don't think so, but yeah. And the final thing is I can like waffle quite a lot and go off topic, so just shout at me if I do that. If anyone plays Donut SMP on Minecraft, that's my current special interest, so I could talk to you about it for like 10 days straight with no sleep. So don't mention it to me during my talk, please. Thank you. Also, I'm very happy to talk to anyone afterwards if you'd like to, but I'm really rubbish at recognizing people. So I know a lot of people here, but if you say hi, I won't know who you are. So feel free to tell me if that's okay. And finally, there is a code for a Q&A, which is on the slides throughout. So feel free to put questions on there for later on. Yeah. Okay, so I thought it might be helpful to talk about the story behind barriers to education. And then I sort of wanted to share the three sort of main learnings or things that feel quite important, but I thought this context might be quite helpful. So as I said, I'm autistic, and unfortunately, I struggled quite a lot when I was younger. I had this thing that I'm sure you've heard from lots of young people where you're always taught that the way to be is sort of like, be like everyone else and try and fit in. But when like, some people can just about manage that, for some it doesn't work. So for me at the age of 20, I went from being very academic and doing like really well to suddenly just not being able to do anything. So I stayed in my room for 3 months, didn't interact with anyone, and just like really, really struggled. And the phrase people give for this sort of thing is autistic burnout. And it's a really tricky thing because it's like, you spent your whole life trying to work out how to be and like how you're supposed to exist, and then you've got it wrong. So then it's like you've lost all your sense of safety and you don't know what to do, and it's like you're starting from scratch again. So it's really, really difficult. But also like one thing, so I talked about autistic burnout, but one thing that I don't like is actually like the term autistic burnout exists. Like, how sad is it that so many young people are so misunderstood that there's a label that literally means like you've been so stressed for so long that you can't do it anymore. It's so sad that that's become a label and a thing that's been accepted. So one thing that's really, really important for me is I struggled quite a lot growing up, but it's so important to sort of do whatever I can to make sure as many young people as possible sort of avoid the struggles my generation and like previous generations of autistic people faced. So I started to get involved in lots of like advocacy work and that sort of stuff. And that led to me working at a local authority. I was quite lucky where I became an advocate for SEND young people as a full-time job, and that was really, really awesome. But I don't mean to be rude to local authorities, but sometimes they're just like a little bit slow, as I'm sure people might know. So I would work with young people and they would share really cool, exciting projects or ideas or things we could do. And then I'd write gigantic reports, we'd make videos, and then just hope that a random important person would take it on board, but we didn't always. So then I just thought, why wait when I can just do something myself? So that's how Spectrum Gaming became a thing. So at the time, one so Spectrum Gaming started during COVID, and at that time I was working at a local authority, and I'd set up sort of Zoom meetings for like local SEND young people to sort of connect for an hour a week. But then I didn't like it. Like it was popular. We had about 150 young people a week attend, but then that was an hour of friendship. What do you do the rest of the time? So then I made a proposal to the council to set up an online community that was open like every day for people to connect and take part in stuff. And then the director of children's services said like, what is online gaming? When I tried to pitch it as an idea, which was like really interesting. So I ended up just leaving the local authority and setting up Spectrum Gaming in my spare time. And now we started 5 years ago, and now we have like 30 staff and support about 1,800 young people. So it's grown really, really fast. But yeah, sorry, I told you I'm a waffler. Sorry, I'm waffling a little bit. But there's three things that I think are quite important and that have led to barriers to education. One thing that's really important to us is that young people are in the lead of what we do. So rather than as adults feeling like we're important and always get things right, like if we're there to support young people, their views should always come first. That's really important. The second thing is like, this sounds so rude again, I'm really sorry, but my experience of working at a local authority is we sort of had a bit of like a copy and paste mindset of like, I don't know, some other local authorities doing something really cool, so let's copy it. And like, rather than being like, there's a gap, let's create something new, let's innovate. So I just wanted to like ditch the script and be okay with making stuff that is quite new and uncomfortable and different, but also quite exciting. And the third thing that's really important to us is I don't know, I feel like quite proud of Spectrum Gaming because we've made a place where a lot of young people feel quite comfortable and safe, but also it doesn't feel right that for some young people it's the only place they feel comfortable and safe. So that's why we do quite a lot of advocacy work. You know, I'm running a football meetup in Manchester on Saturday, and we've got 2 young people coming from London to come and attend it who don't attend anything in their local area, and it's just not fair that people have to travel so far to do that. So for us, advocacy is really, really important. Again, one of the reasons why we created Barriers to Education. So what actually is it then? One big feature of it is the canary in the mine analogy that people might have heard about. If you haven't, then in some place somewhere at some point in time, miners used to go into mines. Well, they wouldn't go anywhere else. So miners went into mines and they would take like a canary in a cage. The reason behind that is canaries had much more sensitive lungs. So if there was any poisonous gas or anything like that, unfortunately, a canary would get poisoned and die. And that was a sign to the miners that they had to get out and to keep themselves safe. And there's a really powerful analogy that says actually when young people struggle to attend school and that sort of stuff, they're often the canaries. So it isn't necessarily that they're the problem, it's that the system isn't working for everyone, but it's having an impact on that group of people the most. But there's a really interesting thing in our community. When we looked at the stats, it was the huge majority of our young people who were struggling in that system. So, you know, when I was at a local authority, I heard about a handful of young people who didn't access any service and struggled to sort of go to school, whereas in Spectrum Gaming, it was a really, really large number of young people who all had that exact same story. So it just felt really important to do something about that. Another thing we noticed is people have made like lots of guidance for what to do if people struggle to access school or are struggling in different settings. But sometimes we'd noticed that it hadn't always been helpful, and we'd spoken to young people who had had different interventions or pieces of support that had accidentally made things trickier rather than easier. And another key theme that we saw is we've seen parents and professionals as well who have become like specialists. So they learn everywhere and read thousands of books and read this boring SEND code of practice and all the other stuff to become like real experts in actually being able to advocate against what you're told is right because it wasn't actually right, which is really tricky. And the second thing that was really interesting in our community is we'd seen young people who had never been to school, who were home educated, who were very like confident and like free and like really happy. So it's that really interesting thing of like, what are the things that are done differently that are really working for those young people? And basically, like, all of that got combined to me being like a ball of rage. And just by coincidence, my local authority had released some new guidance on supporting young people who struggle to attend school. And I read it and I was furious. And this is really, really unprofessional, and I'll never do it ever again. But I did a 40-minute live stream on the Spectrum Gaming Facebook page explaining everything that's wrong with it, which is really bad and very unprofessional. But when I did that, there was an EP in my local area who is really, really amazing, who is now one of the leads for Barriers to Education, who instead of like being quite angry with me, which would have been completely justified, she said, okay, like, what can we do together to fix it? And that was what started Barriers to Education. Yeah, so it's had lots of people involved. We've had over 400 stakeholders actively contributing over the past couple of years, and over 1,500 people gave feedback on it. And basically, we've just got a website that is free for anyone to access and use right now. And a few things that felt really important to us. One is that it's free. The second is that it's accessible, so anyone can use the website at any point. We're also making, I've had a bit of feedback from some local authorities to say, like, they want a document, so we're making a document version as well. The third thing is like, just that it's fresh, like it's new. Like a lot of guidance when people struggle to attend school has research that's from like 2008 and earlier, which is just very old. But yeah, and the final thing is, it feels important to be really caring. Like I said, I was really angry like when I saw the guidance from my local authority, but actually when you really get to know like professionals and people who are working with young people, like a lot of people like care so much and are so passionate, but when you're in a rigid system, it's really, really bloody hard to do what's right for young people sometimes. So it comes from a mindset of absolutely everyone is trying their very best. And that message tries to, yeah, I don't know, I think that's really, really important. Yeah, another thing that is a bit different is like a lot of guidance that people sort of see is based just on research, and I think research is really important and really helpful. This picture at the back makes it look like some sort of fight. I didn't mean to do that. I just thought it looked colourful and cool, but that's not what I mean. But I think research is really important, but I also think that lived experience and practitioner insight really, really matters too. An example for me is I went into autistic burnout in 2018, when I was 20 years old. At that time, there was no research about autistic burnout that existed. So when I was really struggling and didn't know what to do, I spoke to people on social media and other places, and there were hundreds of other people who said, I've been through something similar, which is what matters, here's what's really important. And then the first research on autistic burnout came out 2 years later. And like I said, I think research is really important and has value, but with burnout, it was like 4 years behind what I needed. So I think our approach at Barriers to Education is to combine research, but also being comfortable with using lived experience and practitioner insight and giving that lots of value as well. Yeah. So, like I said, I wanted to share my top 3 things we've learned that feel quite important. But before saying that, I just want to say yeah, I don't know. I think even so far I've said a few things that are a bit tricky, but I think one thing that's really important to me is that those tricky things, I don't believe they're because of people. I think it's because of a system that doesn't always work for a lot of people. And even if you're in a setting that might be quite tricky, or where you have to fight against the government and Ofsted and whatever else, everyone can still make a really, really, really huge difference. Not just professionals, but also parents too. And I think actually, if you've come here, I just wanted to say thank you, because it it really, really means a lot that people really care and really want to work out what to do differently. Yeah, it's just really nice. Yeah. Okay, here's my top 3 things. I'm going to have a quick drink. Sorry, I'm also talking really fast. Do I need to talk slower, or am I okay? I don't know. No, okay, sorry. Okay, so some of these are a bit I feel like, is hot takes the right word? Where I don't know. I think that's the right phrase anyway. But these have come out of a Barriers to Education work, so they feel important to talk about. So it's fine if you disagree with everything I say, but also feel free to reflect on it and look at the website more where we talk about things more in depth. So the first thing is it feels really important to focus less on autism strategies and more on creating the right environment for everyone. So I think there's this sort of approach at the moment where, I'll give you a story. So in my local area, there was a new app that came out that was about managing anxiety for young people, and our young people were asked to review it. They had a look, and then basically they hated it. They ranked it like a 1 out of 10 and gave lots of really comprehensive feedback around what to do differently. It was basically just focused on sort of building resilience and learning to cope, rather than also looking at how to advocate for your needs and changing the environment and that sort of stuff. And when we shared the feedback, what we were then told was, this is paraphrased, it's okay that it doesn't work for them because it's not made for autistic young people. Like, autistic young people will have a different offer. But actually, I just think that's so wrong because, like, first of all, there's huge waiting lists in different areas. I know in Sheffield, it's 6 years until you get a diagnosis. So then you're then using an app that's a 1 out of 10 because you don't have a diagnosis yet. So that's very tricky. And the second thing is, like, I think I'm on the next slide, so I'll maybe shut up. I don't know. But basically, there's this thing of, like, this perspective of, like, people need this one thing, but you're like some sort of magical being who needs something else. And actually, what our research and work has shown is actually the majority of input and the stuff that is the most impactful and has the biggest impact are the thing. The things that make the biggest difference are making changes that impact everyone, not just like having something special for autistic young people. And I think my next slide explains it. Yeah. So there's quite a few things that can be like quite common adjustments after a diagnosis. I say common because it doesn't always happen, even if they are really important. The first one is this anxiety cycle thing. I'm guessing everyone's seen this. So this is what's in like typical sort of guidance when people struggle to attend school. What this guidance says is when you struggle to go in, you have anxiety in relation to it, and the longer you're out of school, the bigger your anxiety gets. So you basically need to go back in as soon as possible. I think there's a better understanding now that when it comes to autistic young people, it's not always like irrational anxiety, but you need sort of real exposure for. Often there are real stresses or real difficulties in the environment, and it's really important to work out what those are and address those. What was I going to say? Yeah, that's one point. The second one is like, I know a lot of schools who have like resource provisions or like quiet areas, but you need to have a diagnosis to access it. And once you do, then you're able to. And the third thing that is like quite a common thing is if someone's like being naughty or like having stress-related behavior, then if you have a diagnosis, then you might have like a bit more compassion, and people might say it's because you're stressed or overwhelmed rather than you choosing to have bad behavior. So there are a few things that tend to happen, but again, like I said, this might be a hot take. My belief, and one belief that's really, really came through in the barriers to education work, is that like every single person deserves compassion. Like again, when you have the anxiety cycle, that's for most young people. If you're autistic, you need something else. But then let's say you're not autistic and you're being bullied at school. Can you have like great exposure to getting bullied? Does that make you feel better? No, not really. It reminds me of like, let's say I walk up to someone and say, I'm going to punch you in the face. But that's a really big step. So I'm going to start with poking you really softly. And then I'll do it a bit harder and I'll increase it every day until you're used to getting punched in the face. Like at the end of it, you're still getting a punch in the face. It's still not a nice thing to happen. So I think it's less about you're autistic, so you need something else. It's more about what is the actual need, what is the barrier, and focusing on that. The second thing is actually the new paper that's come out from someone somewhere. There's been lots of papers recently. Has said there's going to be a focus on having sort of like I don't know what they're called, like specialist support spaces or like resource provisions in schools. But through barriers to education, we actually did a lot of research on these. So I visited 5 different ones and interviewed young people and professionals and that sort of stuff. And one of the big things that people said is actually like when like the best way to use it is when you can use it proactively. So you shouldn't have to need a diagnosis. You shouldn't have to have it on your EHCP, but you need access to this space. Just if someone needs it, let them have access. Like, I don't know, what if someone has, sorry if this is like a trigger for anyone, but if someone's like, I don't know, if someone's had some really sad news, so they're really struggling on a day, they should be able to access a quiet room. You shouldn't have to have it documented that you need it. And the third one I'm going to come on to. Yeah, basically everyone deserves compassion, but also waiting lists are getting longer too. So you'll have lots of people you're supporting who are autistic and you might not know yet. Like I said, like in Sheffield, if you are referred for an assessment when you're in year 6 at school, you'll get an assessment when you finish year 11. So what's the point? But, well, there is a point, but yeah. Yeah, so there's, like I said, there's things that I think everyone should have access to. One debate I've heard in schools quite a lot is, you know, we can't let an autistic young person have a like fidget toy because then everyone will want one. And sometimes I just think, like, why not just let everyone have them then? Like, I don't know. And things like having movement breaks. I was saying before, I feel quite lucky right now because you guys have to like sit that way. You don't have to, but everyone is expected to sit down for quite a while, whereas I get to just walk and move around. Because actually sitting down for an hour isn't actually that conducive to learning, and movement is really important. So why not give everyone access to it? Another thing is, like, some people just need to go to the toilet. Like, just let people go. Why do you need a special pass? And the another thing when it comes to autism is we actually have quite an exciting program in Spectrum Gaming where we have a 6-week course for autistic young people to learn about what autism is and sort of develop advocacy skills and that sort of stuff. But then actually, like, shouldn't everyone be taught to advocate for themselves and for that to be listened to? Like, you shouldn't have to have a diagnosis for what you say to be taken seriously. But yeah. In terms of this section, one part of the Barriers to Education website is lots of case studies from sort of visiting schools and working with different areas and sort of sharing what works. So in Manchester, we have a place called the Ambition Community Trust. So they have a few schools and they don't use any form of like behaviourist practice. So they're really, really cool. So I recommend looking at that. We've written like a behaviour policy that doesn't use behaviorism as an alternative if you want to see it, and it's free to look at. Like I said, I've visited lots of like specialist support spaces, so there's case studies and learning from that as well. And Professor Caroline Bond from University of Manchester has shared some research around what a tiered system should look like or could look like when it comes to attendance, again focusing on the recognition that you have the biggest impact when you focus on making the system work better for everyone, rather than just focusing on a selected group of people. Yeah, okay. The second point, again, this is like a really interesting, like exciting one. So feel free to ask me about it later. But the second thing is the very firm belief that absolutely everyone is doing the very best they can. But there's also a really interesting thing that actually like having external input can accidentally like undermine our intrinsic motivation to do well. So the one thing that is like that is embedded into all of the work I do, but also that's in the Barriers to Education research and learning and work, is around something called self-determination theory. So we've got slides about it in a second, but it's basically just the idea that everyone is intrinsically motivated to do well, and they do the very best they can based on their level of stress, their skills profile, and the environments that they're in. And that's a really, really key thing. But if you think about that, it's quite hard to believe or like act on, because so much of society is based on like rewards and like punishments and like molding behavior and that sort of stuff. But actually, if you look at the research, there's quite a lot that shows that stuff isn't always very effective. But I know some people might be looking at me like I'm a bit bonkers right now. So I have got a few research studies to sort of back it up. I am also a hypocrite because I said like Barriers to Education has like new research that's come out quite recently, and these research studies are very old, but the point I was going to make was they're very old, but people pretend they don't exist. But they do, and there's lots of them. So the first one, again, the sort of idea behind these is that people are intrinsically motivated to do well. So if you move away from trying to make people comply, they do better. So the first study looked at companies that wanted to increase the amount of seatbelt use that drivers Yeah. So there was two sort of cohorts. There was one group where there were incentives or rewards for using seatbelts, and there was a group where there was no rewards. People were just given information about why it's important, and both groups got that information. In the group where people were rewarded for using seatbelts, there was a range of a 62% increase in seatbelt use to a 4% decrease. Whereas in the group where there were no rewards and punishments, there was a 152% increase in seatbelt use on average. There's a second study where there were some tutors. So there were 12 to 13-year-old girls who were tutors for some younger girls. And one group was promised movie tickets after doing tutoring, and one group wasn't. The group that was promised movie tickets showed more frustration in teaching people, and the people they were teaching showed that they had less understanding of the material that they were being taught. Again, like showing a really interesting thing. I just thought I'd share those. There's hundreds of studies, but I just thought they'd be a cool like little flavor to think about. And again, the Barriers to Education website talks about all of this stuff really in depth, so it's quite cool. Yeah. So, what is self-determination theory? It basically says that we are intrinsically motivated to meet three basic needs. This is an image drawn by a young person that basically shows like you're a captain on a ship and you're sailing towards like the three things that you're sort of looking for. So the first one is having a need for autonomy, so having choice and control over your actions. The second one is relatedness, so that's about feeling connected with and accepted by the people around you. And the third one is competence, feeling that you're learning and developing skills. And it says everyone is intrinsically motivated to do those things, and they do it in the best way they can. But that's quite an interesting thing, because let's say, I don't know, someone's on a playground and there's a group of friends and they don't know how to like join the group, then you might sort of, I don't know, wind people up a bit, because actually like that might be the best you can do to try and get some connection. I don't know if I've explained that properly, but I hope it sort of makes sense. But we meet these needs in the best way we can, but it's impacted by stresses. That might be in the environment. It might be internal stresses, like if you didn't get much sleep or something like that. Unmet needs, and also skill gaps as well. And the sort of key message here is actually focusing on these things, working out what are the barriers, what are the needs, rather than this sort of like behaviourist practice that is quite common. Really sets young people up for success. In Spectrum Gaming, we don't use any form of like behaviorism whatsoever, and it's like it has a really big impact on young people. Also, I can't see what my next slide is, and I have like that ADHD brain where I'm guessing what my next slide is and I have no idea. So and I get jump scared every time we come up. But here's a couple of examples that are really interesting. So one's to sort of like prove this point. I was really cheeky, and in Manchester we did some training for professionals, and we made a behavior chart for them. So we had like the sun if they were good, the clouds in the middle, and then the rain clouds if they were sad. If they were misbehaving, and we made a set of rules, and we sort of ranked people along it. And when we did this afterwards, when we spoke to people who were attending, people said that they really struggled to focus on the content because they were too focused on not getting told off. Or when people were put on the cloud, they said like, what's the point in even trying because I'm already down there? And other people were like judging other people based on where they were getting ranked and that sort of stuff. So that was just like a really interesting piece of learning. And the second thing, again, which I think is a really important concept, which is why I'm bringing it up again, sorry, is like this idea of the anxiety cycle and sort of pushing people back in is like quite widely accepted and like done quite a lot. But actually, if you look at it through a lens of self-determination theory, every single person is intrinsically motivated to learn. So if you have the right environment and people have the right support, you don't need to push people in because they want to do it anyway. Like people have that internal desire to want to learn and do things. Yeah. The reason that's important is because I talked earlier about my own journey with burnout, and we have young people in our community who are also in burnout or sort of recovering from it. And one thing that people said was this idea of actually, if you're struggling to attend school, there's a reason why. And unless you address that, then you're likely to push people into that sort of like burnout spiral. So it's really, really important to recognize that. Yeah. But a second thing to think about, and again, we've written about this quite extensively, is that it isn't just about changing the environment. I came up with a word last week that might make no sense, but I called it like relational wobble. Maybe it is a thing. I don't know. But the idea is actually like if someone has a difficult experience or you're really struggling, you can fix the problem, but there's also people's sort of thoughts and feelings and things that they need support with as well, and that's really, really important. So let's say, I don't know, let's say someone is in the dinner hall and it's really loud and overwhelming, so that person doesn't want to go in again. You could fix the dinner hall, but you also need to think about the impact of what being in the dinner hall had on the person too. And being able to sort of recognize that and work with that is a really, really, really important factor. Like when we have like new staff who join the Spectrum Gaming team, sometimes they might think there's an issue online, so we'll talk about it and remind people of the rules and when it's all resolved. But actually, like, no, like, but this young person is still really, really, really peed off with that young person. So, like, they're following the rules for now. But unless you address that, then, like, that those feelings and stress build up, if that makes sense. Yeah, and another thing that's on our website is a full guide to sort of like chronic burnout. So in barriers to education, we don't talk about autistic burnout. We sort of talk about acute burnout and chronic burnout. So acute burnout is a sort of shorter term thing of starting to struggle, and chronic burnout is when you're in that survival mode and you're still expected to meet the same expectations until the point where you physically can't do it anymore. Yeah, I'm aware of time, so I'll hurry up. But yeah, so the final thing is relationships are the foundation of everything. It's like the most important thing you can do is just really, really take time to get to know, connect with, and build relationships with the people you work with. That is just like essential. And I made a little, some people might think it's cringe, but I liked it when I made it. I made a little like acronym of like what might be helpful to think about. So the first one is just like being human. I think a lot of young people tell us that you get the impression that adults always have their lives together and things are going perfectly and we never get anything wrong and that sort of stuff. But actually just being open with young people and letting them know like you make mistakes and saying sorry when you get something wrong and just like being open with that, young people say that's really, really important. Some of the young people I get on really well with are ones where I've really messed up, but I've said sorry and we've worked out what I can do differently, and that's been really powerful and important for them. The second one is empathy, which is just really, really getting to understand and sort of hear someone's story. It's not, you can't always completely understand someone else's perspective, but even if you can't truly understand it, you can still take what they say seriously and act on it. So people say that's really important. The third thing is authenticity. So that's just like, being your natural self and working out how to make that work with the needs that someone has in front of you. Like when I'm with young people, I'm very loud and energetic, but some people might need quiet. But then if I try to be quiet all the time, that won't necessarily work for me. So it's about working out the compromise of being authentic and making it work. Being real really matters, and if you're not, people can tell. The fourth one is about knowing how to repair relationships. So if you get things wrong or if there's something a young person's struggling with, knowing how to really problem solve with that young person in a way that they feel heard and valued. The next one is time. So just having time to really get to know and connect with people, which is really, really hard in the schooling system, but also it is really important. So we wanted to name it. And then the final thing is self-care, because to do these things, you need to be in a good place yourself. And again, like it's really tricky when you're in a really stressed system to be at peace with yourself. And like, but if you're not, then you lose your curiosity and your empathy and your care. So it's really important to focus on that as well. We've got lots of free resources. I'm out of time. And thank you. There you go.
Thank you so much, Andy. Every time I hear you speak, I'm just so inspired. Thank you so much. Your energy, your enthusiasm, and your very obvious care and compassion just radiates every time you speak. So thank you so much for sharing your wisdom with us. I've got some questions, but I'm also aware that in my excitement about introducing you, I forgot to explain to the people in the room how the question and answer was going to work. So apologies for that. If you would like to put a question to Andy or any of us on the team, then please do use the Slido. I do have some questions here from the people who were joining us online, which I'm going to start off with, which will give people some time to pose your question. We only have, let's have a think. We only have about 10 or 15 minutes, so we won't get to everyone's questions. But what we will do, Andy, unfortunately, is only going to be available to answer questions this evening, but the rest of the Wellbeing Hub team will try our best to answer any questions that we might be able to answer from this in the coming days and weeks. And again, we will publish that on our website and so on. So Andy, questions from our online attendees. Is there anything that helped in your autistic burnout? We have lots of people online who themselves or their children have experienced burnout, and they would really like to know what helped, or indeed what would have helped looking back.
Yeah, cool. Thank you. I think the first thing, one thing I say that wasn't helpful for me because I wasn't in school, but that's helpful for other people, is like, when people go into burnout, the first thing that people tend to focus on is like, let's get people back into school, when actually that's the opposite of what people need. Again, it's that recognition that like everyone is intrinsically motivated to learn. So that will happen in the future when they feel ready and when they feel safe enough. Out in Spectrum Gaming, we also have a self-directed learning community for young people in person, and young people come who are sort of in burnout and struggling to access anything else. And what you see is like, when you focus on giving people a place of safety and connection, then people move on to wanting to learn once they feel safe enough to then do that. But I think in terms of my personal experience, I think one thing is just been having that time to sort of like get back to a place of safety. I think the second thing is connecting with people online. So when I first went through burnout, I really struggled to go out and leave the house or do anything. So for me, the online community was really important. And like, some of my closest friends are like random strangers from the other side of the world who I met during that time period. And I think the third thing to say is like, when you have experienced burnout, that then means that you have like difficult experiences and trauma and other things that you need to process. And there are things that can help with that. So there are things like EMDR therapy that's been really highly recommended. There's other stuff like, for me, it was like running. So I started to go running every single day but before I did that, I always had to be busy. So I was always sort of like gaming or watching videos and that sort of stuff. But the reason was like, my brain was so overwhelming that I couldn't just sit and think. But once I started to go running, that was the first time when, you know, I could think about stuff and process it, but also I was so focused on just trying to not to die because I couldn't breathe properly. That like, they weren't completely overwhelming, if that makes sense. But if not anything else, you know, a lot of young people might not be able to access therapy or other things. I'd say in that case, like, time is a natural healer as well. So that's also really, really important. Yeah, burnout is a big thing. It's life-changing. Like I said, like you feel like you've learned how to act and how to be in the world, but you got it completely wrong. So then it's like, what do you do? And it's like starting from the beginning. So for me, it was about 3 years of struggling to sort of leave the house, access things, talk to people, until I got to a point where I was starting to feel like, okay, I'm actually starting to feel pretty okay now. So it is quite a long process. But yeah.
Thanks, Andy. Thank you. Lots of love for Spectrum Gaming website and the resources that you and your community have made. Which section would you recommend for newly diagnosed young people to look at first?
Cool, thank you. So I actually wouldn't recommend the Spectrum Gaming website. We've got a different website. So we have a website called Autism Understood. So it's autismunderstood.co.uk. So that is just a free website with lots of information about autism for autistic young people. It's got 77 articles based on lots of stuff, and young people and professionals have like reviewed it all. And yeah, it's really cool. So I recommend that. Yeah.
Thank you very much. And you mentioned in your talk about the importance of self-advocacy. What's your biggest piece of advice for supporting young people to self-advocate in education?
I think the biggest thing is like finding people who will actually listen. like you can develop like all the self-advocacy skills in the world. Like I feel like I have a lot of self-advocacy skills, but then still, even with certain people or in certain environments, it's really tricky or like near on impossible. So I think like finding the right people and the right spaces like really matter. You know, I've had some appointments with a GP where I just want to like shout at them a lot because they just don't want to listen. Whereas there's others who are really, really incredible and actually value your words. So I think actually being confident enough to self-advocate only works if people actually listen to what you're saying. So yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. A comment here that's been upvoted quite a lot is "this guy is so tough." There is that as well. I just need to point that one out because everyone can see it. But also thinking about yeah, like this question that has been asked, which has an unfortunate typo, which is amusing, but there's what comments do you have to what thoughts do you have on the fact that there are, you know, I'm really mindful of this as a university. We have lots of support. Whoops. We have lots of support available for our students, but they need to ask for it, need to find it. And this question here, like not being able to access a quiet space because it's too overwhelming to put your hand up or leave the room. Do you have any advice? I'm just carrying on, but is anyone, oh, thank goodness. Hooray, thank you. No worries, no worries. Yes, so having access to quiet spaces, having access to adjustments, but maybe not necessarily being able to do that because of actually, you know, being too overwhelmed.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I also think it's not even just about being overwhelmed. It's just a difficult thing to do in general. Like it takes a lot to sort of try and advocate for what you need. So that can be a lot of pressure. So I guess for me, I always think like the onus should be on like the adults who are there. Like rather than being expected to put your hand up to go into a quiet room, do they know you well enough to recognize when you're starting to feel overwhelmed or like when things are starting to get difficult? You know, young people who we support, most young people who I speak to who come to meetups, we already have a plan together of like what it might look like if they're starting to get overwhelmed and what we might do about it. So actually, rather than it all being on the young person, yes, it's great to be able to advocate for yourself, and that's something that it's helpful to sort of like aim for, I guess, once people get more used to that sort of thing in the short term and on an ongoing basis. It's helpful for adults to put the onus on them instead. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. And those of you who've attended any of our webinars in the past, and Andy, you've very graciously hosted one of our webinars before, will know that I always end the Q&A session with the same question of our speakers, and that is, of all the things that you've talked to us about tonight, Andy, if we were to leave with just one key idea, what would that be?
Be a geek about self-determination theory, look at all the research, and then that would change how you view everything. And yeah, that's it. Yeah, it's really helpful.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. Thank you. And I'm now going to hand over to my colleague, Emma Harris.
Thank you. Hi, thank you. And thank you again, Andy. Really excellent talk. So as Jay said, I'm Dr. Emma Harris. I'm going to be taking through our final section for tonight's event. So we spent some time thinking about, well, lots of things: autistic wellbeing, barriers to education. We're going to finish by bringing it a little bit back to the Wellbeing Hub and thinking about kind of what next. Where do we go from here with the information that we've spoken about tonight and what we've learned? So I'm going to be asking you to get your phones out again. Got another QR code for you. I'll just take us to that slide now. So as before, if you could scan the QR code, it'll take you to the question, which is, what should the Centre for Autism and Wellbeing Hub focus on next to best support autistic children, young people and their families? So we're really interested in hearing your ideas about what you think the Wellbeing Hub should be doing now. What should we be focusing on? Are there things that you think are missing from current services? Are there things that you wish you could perhaps access as an autistic person yourself or as a professional? It's helpful, a reminder of some of the themes of things we're currently working on are around supporting autistic children with their identity, supporting parents and carers, supporting professionals, and building a community of autistic individuals and their allies. So if you have ideas, we would love to hear them. It's great, there's some coming already. More quickly than I can read, really. Home support, identity support for children, more direct work, school uniform, collaboration with schools, educators, online gaming, funding. There's so much here. I'm just going to let these keep coming in for a minute. Gaming seems to be a popular theme, perhaps inspired by our last speaker. Mental health first aid, training for school staff, more collaboration, outreach for neurotypical cats. Yes, I'm on board with that one too. Fantastic. Okay, I'm going to let those keep coming in. I think it's going to be a job for us next week, perhaps, to go through all of these and think about what we do with them. So yes, thank you for sharing all your ideas and your expertise. Of course, we're going to be using those to shape what we do next in the hub and think about what projects we next develop. The other thing that really helps us with developing new projects is funding and donations. As Fiona said earlier, we are a team who are funded almost entirely through donations. We couldn't do any of the work we do without the help of the donors, and we're so thankful and grateful for the support that allows our team to provide. So if you've enjoyed tonight, if you've learnt new things, if you're thinking, yeah, I'd like to make a donation maybe, or perhaps you work for a company or know an organisation who might like to support us, then now is a really good time to scan this QR code. And then if later on you think you might want to go ahead with that or get in touch with us, then the website is there on your phone for you to come back to. And finally, our final side of the evening is really just a chance for us to say thank you to everybody. So we've got lots of people specifically who we're doing to thank. So the University of Reading Centenary grant scheme, they provided the funding for tonight's event, and we couldn't have done that without them. The University of Reading alumni team, who provided the very generous donation, which allowed us to launch the Wellbeing Hub in the first place. All the young people, families and professionals who take part in our research and support our projects, really grateful to them. Nick and the NeuroBears team, Toby and the team at Motion Blur for their video support, for being me videos, and of course all of you for joining us tonight. So this is the point in the evening where I'll be saying goodbye to everybody who joined us online. Thank you so much for being here. We really appreciate it. For everybody here in person, this is the end of the presentation, but not necessarily the end of the event. So we'll all be moving over to the foyer. So